primary objective early in the day is to get into a mode of being focused yet alert so that I can get work done. I found that the best way for me to achieve that state is through fasting. So I don't eat anything until about 11 a.m. or 12 noon. I'm not absolutely religious about it. There are days when I'll have a few Brazil nuts or a spoonful or 3 of almond butter, for instance. But most days I'm not doing that. I'm just not eating anything. I'm drinking some caffeine. Caffeine source for me is yerba mate, guayusa tea. Those are my preferred sources. I tend to avoid coffee these days. Occasionally I'll have a cup, but most often I stick to the teas. I drink water as much as I feel I need to and want to. And I also drink my athletic greens, which is compatible, at least for me, with fasting. Let's talk about why fasting works to create this heightened state of alertness, yet calm brain state. Fasting increases levels of adrenaline, also called epinephrine, in the brain and body. And when our levels of epinephrine and adrenaline are increased, we learn better, we can focus better. There's terrific data supporting that. You don't want epinephrine, aka adrenaline, too high. That feels like stress and panic. You get jittery, you can't focus. But in its optimal range, adrenaline really provides a heightened sense of focus and the ability to encode, meaning bring in, and retain, remember information. And so, since my job is mainly a cerebral one where I'm writing grants and working on papers, etc., I fast in the early part of the day. I mentioned ingesting things like guayusa or yerba mate, or in my case, athletic greens. Many people ask, in fact, there's a whole community and discussion boards, etc., and YouTube comments on the internet about what breaks a fast and what doesn't. The fact of the matter is that's going to be highly individual because it's going to depend on how sensitive your blood sugar is. And more accurately, it's going to depend on things like your insulin sensitivity. So, for instance, if you're somebody who gets up in the morning, hydrates, and goes out for a 6-mile run, you could probably eat a jar of almond butter and still be what's called fat fasted. Your insulin levels will still be very low because even though that is a large volume of almond butter, even to me and Costello, that large number of calories come from a source that doesn't increase blood sugar very much and insulin very much. Now, I'm not suggesting you do that, but what I just described is a vastly different situation than somebody that ate their last meal at 2 a.m. and that meal was essentially a feast. And for that person, fasting until 10 or 11 a.m., their blood sugar might still actually be pretty high or even low-ish, such that they might eat 1 almond and it would bump them out of fasting. So you get the idea. It's going to depend on your recent eating history, your blood sugar history, your glycogen stores, etc. So if anyone tells you that breaks a fast or that doesn't, that's kind of silly. Would 1 grain of sugar break your fast? No. Would an entire tablespoon of sugar break your fast? Yes. You'll get a big blip in blood sugar and insulin from that. However, how long that lasts, how long it breaks your fast will depend on how glycogen depleted you are and a number of other factors. So for me, I just keep it fairly simple. I ingest water, caffeine from yerba mate and guayusa, and I drink my athletic greens with some lemon juice in it. That constitutes my fasting. And there are days when I do all those things. There are days when I do none of those things, although most days, I would say about 355 days out of the year, I'm ingesting water, caffeine, and athletic greens during this period of fasting early in the day, and that's the period of time when I do my work. One interesting fact about yerba mate and guayusa teas is that they increase release of something called GLP-1. GLP-1 is related to glucagon. Glucagon is a hormone that you can sort of think about as opposite to insulin and blood sugar. It's more complex than that, but GLP-1 has a couple of positive properties. One is it increases lipolysis and mobilization of body fat stores, so burning of fat. In fact, there are now a number of clinical trials that are achieving good success, and there are drugs out there only available by prescription which mimic GLP-1 and are being used to treat, quite successfully, certain types of diabetes and obesity. Now, I'm not diabetic, nor am I trying to shed a ton of body fat, but I figure as long as I'm fasting and as long as I like yerba mate and guayusa, which I do, they're delicious. I'll tell you which type I use in a moment. I might as well increase my GLP-1 because it's Probably not as good as getting out and doing some cardio work, but nonetheless, if I'm fasted, increasing GLP-1 in my system, I'm going to be alert from the caffeine, the adrenaline, etc., and I'm going to be burning body fat while I'm doing my work. So for me, it's just an efficient, biochemically rational, or I should say grounded in quality biochemistry sort of approach. Yerba mate comes in a lot of different forms. There are a lot of different brands out there, etc. I don't have any relationship whatsoever in a business sense to any of these brands. Some of them are very smoky. Just because of something in my genetic makeup, or I don't know, maybe it was some sort of Y chromosome associated lesion early in life, but I don't like smoky flavors. So I'm not a Gouda cheese guy. I don't like smoky stuff. You may love it, but I tend to avoid smoky tasting mates. Instead, there's a particular brand that I just found on the internet called Anna Park. I don't know Anna. I don't know if she has a park, and I certainly don't know what Anna Park is. But for me, that's the best tasting yerba mate. Again, I don't have any relationship to them, but it's affordable in the context of yerba mate, and it's the one that I use. And I should mention, along the lines of affordability and GLP-1, is there's a nice feature of yerba mate, which is if you put it in a filter or a metal strainer and you pour hot water over it and then drink it, keep the leaves, the yerba mate leaves, can be used over and over again. And it seems that the GLP-1 stimulating aspects of mate actually are enhanced with subsequent pour overs. So there's something interesting about these teas that my tea aficionado friends tell me allows the tea to release more of some of the beneficial compounds by reusing the tea leaves. Now, eventually it'll grow mold and other sorts of disgusting things. You don't really want to run that experiment. I would say you can use it for a day or two before it starts to go bad. But that's a feature that will extend the life of whatever yerba mate you happen to use if you decide to use it. And that's certainly what I do.